Pam Bondi stepped into the Senate Judiciary Committee hearing room, her blonde hair perfectly styled, her navy blue suit crisp and professional. The former Florida Attorney General carried a thin leather portfolio that seemed ordinary but contained evidence that would change everything. The committee room buzzed with anticipation, cameras flashing as Senator Cory Booker leaned forward at the dais, a confident smile playing on his lips. Just moments earlier, Booker had delivered a blistering attack against Bondi, calling her testimony a defense of corruption and partisan theater. His voice had risen to that familiar, passionate crescendo that had made him a Democratic star. "Ms. Bondi," he declared, pointing directly at her, "your history of defending questionable practices makes you an unreliable witness before this committee." The crowd had murmured their approval, Democratic staffers nodding eagerly. Booker thought he had her cornered, thought this would be another viral moment in his political highlight reel. But Bondi didn't flinch. Instead, she calmly opened her portfolio and removed a single document that made Booker's face freeze mid-sentence. What happened next left the entire committee room speechless and may have permanently altered Booker's political future. Before diving into this explosive story, comment where you're watching from. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more political truth bombs that the mainstream media won't show you. The tension between Pam Bondi and Cy Booker had been building for years, representing the wider political divide in America. Bondi, the first female Attorney General of Florida, had built her reputation as a tough prosecutor and defender of conservative principles. Her blonde hair and polished appearance belied a razor-sharp legal mind that had successfully argued before the Supreme Court. Now, as a private citizen called to testify before Congress on election integrity, she came prepared for battle. Booker, the former mayor of Newark-turned-senator, had cultivated his image as a progressive champion, known for his Spartacus moment during the Kavanaugh hearings and his passionate speeches that went viral on social media. Booker had presidential ambitions and a flair for dramatic confrontations that played well to his base. With his broad shoulders and commanding presence, he dominated most rooms. He entered the hearing room. That day was packed with journalists, political staffers, and members of the public. The stakes couldn't have been higher. This wasn't just about one hearing, it was about who controlled the narrative on election integrity, a topic that had divided Americans for years. Democrats claimed voter suppression was the real threat. Republicans pointed to potential fraud and irregularities. Camera operators jostled for position, knowing that confrontations between star political personalities meant ratings gold. What they didn't know was that this particular confrontation would surpass all expectations. Ms. Bondi Committee Chairman Dick Durbin had begun. "We've called you here today to discuss your research into election processes. Please proceed with your opening statement." Bondi had just begun speaking when Booker interrupted, something he was known for during high-profile hearings. He leaned toward his microphone, his deep voice filling the chamber. "Mr. Chairman, before the witness continues, I'd like to note for the record that Ms. Bondi has a history of partisan positions that calls into question her objectivity on this matter." The interruption was calculated, a move to throw Bondi off balance before she could even present her findings. Democratic staffers exchanged knowing glances. Republican members frowned at the breach of protocol. The battle lines were drawn, but Bondi remained composed, her eyes locked on Booker with unexpected confidence. Senator Booker, Chairman Durbin, cautioned, "Please allow the witness to complete her statement before questioning begins." Booker nodded with a slight smile, sitting back in his chair, but his interruption had achieved its purpose, establishing dominance and putting Bondi on the defensive, or so he thought. Bondi began her testimony methodically, laying out her research on election procedures across several key states. Her voice remained steady as she discussed statistical anomalies and procedural concerns. Democratic side of the DIs showed dismissive body language, checking phones, whispering to aides, rolling eyes. 15 minutes into her testimony, Senator Amy Klobuchar passed Booker a note. He read it, nodded, and when Bondi paused to take a sip of water, he seized the opportunity. "Miss Bondi, you've made several claims about election irregularities, but Isn't it true that your own organization received funding from groups with a vested interest in challenging election results? The question clearly planned in advance. Drew approving nods from the Democratic side. This was Booker's specialty, the pointed question that suggested impropriety. Without directly alleging it perfect for social media clips, Bondi placed her water glass down slowly. Senator, my research stands on its merits regardless of funding sources, but for the record, my organization is transparently funded, non-partisan. Booker's voice rose incredulously. Your history suggests. Otherwise, you appeared at political rallies, endorsed candidates, and even Senator Bondi interrupted firmly. My past political activities are not relevant to the data I'm presenting today. The tension in the room. Ratcheted higher camera operators zoomed in on both faces. Booker's growing indignation versus Bondi's cool resolve. For the next 20 minutes, the exchange grew increasingly heated. Booker cited Bondi's past statements on voter ID laws, her support for various Republican candidates, and her media appearances on conservative networks. His tone grew more contemptuous with each question, his body language more aggressive. Democratic colleagues nodded. Encouragement. This was the Booker. They knew passionate, righteous, dominating the exchange, but something unexpected was happening. Instead of wilting under Booker's prosecutorial style, Bondi became more composed. She answered each accusation with precision, never raising her voice but never backing down. The Republican members noticed the shift first. A subtle change in the power dynamics of the room. Senator Booker, she said during one exchange, you've spent considerable time questioning my motives rather than addressing my findings. Is there a reason you're avoiding the actual data? Murmurs rippled through the gallery. Booker's friendly media outlets would edit that exchange out, but everyone in the room felt the momentary shift. Booker seemed briefly thrown off. His rhythm then came, the moment that changed everything. After nearly 30 minutes of increasingly personal questioning, Booker brought up a donation Bondi's office had received years ago during her time as Florida's Attorney General. Miss Bondi, you received a $25,000 donation from the Trump Foundation to your re-election campaign in 2013, and subsequently, your office decided not to pursue an investigation into Trump University. Do you really expect this committee to believe you're an impartial witness on election integrity? The room fell silent. This was the kill shot, the moment Booker had been building toward Democratic staffers. Already had their phones ready to clip the moment. For Twitter, Bondi didn't immediately respond. Instead, she slowly opened her leather portfolio and removed a single sheet of paper. I was hoping we might focus on election data today, she said quietly. But since Senator Booker insists on questioning my integrity, I feel compelled to address a matter of public record. She slid on reading glasses and looked down at the document. Senator Booker, are you familiar with a donation made to your senatorial campaign on March 12, 2019? Inches, the amount of $10,000. Booker frowned slightly. I have thousands of donors. Miss Bondi, my campaign follows all proper disclosure requirements. Yes, I'm certain it does, Bondi continued, her voice steady. This particular donation came from the Fairview Capital Group. Does that ring any bells? The committee room remained silent, but a subtle shift occurred. Republican senators leaned forward. Democratic staffers stopped typing on their phones. Suddenly alert, Booker maintained his composure, but a subtle tension appeared in his jaw. As I said, I have many donors. The Fairview Capital Group, Bondi continued, is a subsidiary of Vista Partners, which at the time was under federal investigation for tax irregularities. 3 weeks after receiving this donation, you wrote a letter to the Treasury Department questioning the investigation's timeline. I have copies for the committee. She removed additional papers from her portfolio and handed them to the committee clerk, who began distributing them to stunned senators on both sides of the dais. Wait just a minute. Booker began his confidence, visibly shaken. That's a complete mischaracterization. But Bondi wasn't finished. The room was now completely silent, every eye fixed on her, as she methodically laid out a timeline connecting Booker's campaign donations to his official actions on 3 separate occasions. With each example, she provided documentation, public records that anyone could verify. But that no one had previously connected. Chairman Durbin, looking uncomfortable, tried to intervene. "Miss Bondi, we should return to the topic of the hearing with all due respect, Mr. Chairman." Bondi responded firmly. "Senator Booker has spent nearly 40 minutes questioning my integrity and motivations. I believe I'm entitled to establish that selective concerns about conflicts of interest might be problematic for many in public service, including the senator." Gallery erupted in murmurs. Journalists frantically typed notes. Booker's face had transformed from confident to stunned to angry in the space of minutes, while several of his Democratic colleagues were suddenly very interested in the papers before them, avoiding eye contact. "These donations," Bondi continued, her voice rising slightly, "for the first time were all perfectly legal, just as the donation to my campaign was legal and properly disclosed. The difference, Senator Booker, is that I never took official action based on that donation, despite what you've implied your letter to Treasury. However, this is absurd." Booker interrupted, his composure cracking. "You're trying to distract from your own. I have the floor." Senator Bondi stated firmly, "You've had 40 minutes to question my character. I believe I'm entitled to respond." The clerk handed the final set of documents to Chairman Durbin, who glanced at them with a furrowed brow. The room was so quiet, you could hear papers rustling. Bondi removed her reading glasses and looked directly at Booker. "Senator, you've built your reputation on righteousness and transparency. You speak eloquently about integrity in public service, yet when your own fundraising is examined with the same scrutiny you apply to others, a troubling pattern emerges." She turned to address the entire committee. "I didn't come here today to discuss campaign finance. I came to present data on election procedures that deserve bipartisan attention, but when my personal integrity is repeatedly attacked as a way to dismiss that data without examining it, I have no choice but to defend myself." The moment crystallized something. Everyone in the room felt the tables had completely turned. Booker, who had begun the exchange as the aggressor, now sat rigid, defensive, as whispers spread through the chamber. His Democratic colleagues looked uncomfortable, suddenly aware that the viral clips from this hearing would not be what they anticipated. Senator John Kennedy of Louisiana, known for his folksy but sharp questioning, leaned forward. "Miss Bondi, just to clarify, are you suggesting Senator Booker acted improperly with these donations?" "I'm suggesting," Bondi replied carefully, "that if we're going to question the motives of witnesses based on who supported their work, that standard should apply universally. I'd prefer we focus on facts and data rather than attacks on character." Kennedy nodded slowly, a slight smile forming. "Well, that dog will hunt." Booker, regaining some composure, tried to redirect. "Mr. Chairman, this is a blatant attempt to distract from Miss Bondi's testimony, which remains unsupported by Senator Booker." Chairman Durbin interrupted, looking troubled. "I think we should take a 15-minute recess." The chairman's intervention, cutting off the member of his own party, spoke volumes about how dramatically the hearing had shifted. As senators filed out for the recess, cameras captured Booker in an intense discussion with his staff, his face tense, gesturing emphatically. Meanwhile, Bondi sat calmly at the witness table, sipping water as Republican members approached to speak with her. When the committee reconvened, the entire tone had changed. Chairman Durbin began with a statement about the importance of focusing on the hearing's subject matter. Booker's subsequent questions were brief, technical, and devoid of the personal attacks that had characterized his earlier approach. The confidence and moral superiority that had emanated from him at the hearing's start had evaporated in the space of one exchange. Pam Bondi had not only defended herself, she had fundamentally altered the power dynamic of the entire proceeding, transforming from target to commanding presence. As the hearing concluded, it was clear to everyone present that something remarkable had transpired, something that would reverberate beyond this room by the time Pam Bondi left the Senate hearing room. The political earthquake she had triggered was already spreading across Washington Capitol Hill. Staffers furiously texted journalists who rushed to publish the first stories with headlines like "Bondi turns tables on Booker in stunning congressional testimony" and "Former AG Bondi silences Booker with surprise financial disclosures." Within 30 minutes, clips of the exchange flooded social media. The hashtag #JocksBondiProof started trending nationwide, with conservatives sharing the moment Booker's face fell as Bondi pulled out her documentation. "Watch Pam Bondi absolutely destroy Cory Booker," with receipts, wrote one account with over 2 million followers. The video, garnering hundreds of thousands of views within hours. Mainstream networks scrambled to adjust their coverage. What was supposed to be another Booker moment, the senator passionately confronting a conservative witness, morphed into something entirely different. CNN's political panel looked visibly uncomfortable discussing the hearing, with one commentator admitting this did not go the way Senator Booker expected. Fox News, meanwhile, devoted their prime-time programming to the exchange, with Tucker Carlson opening his show by saying, "Tonight you'll see one of the most significant congressional takedowns in recent memory." Pam Bondi just gave a masterclass in how to handle political ambush. By evening, the story had evolved beyond the hearing itself. Journalists began investigating the connections. Bondi had outlined, verifying the timeline of donations and Booker's subsequent actions, while careful not to allege illegality. Reports confirmed the basic facts Bondi had presented. The donations existed, and Booker's office had taken the actions she described. Senator Booker's office released a statement calling Bondi's presentation a misleading attempt to distract from important questions about election integrity. The statement explained that the senator's actions were based on constituent concerns and policy principles, not campaign contributions, but the defensive tone only fueled further coverage in conservative media. Bondi was immediately elevated to hero status. "Pam Bondi showed Washington how it's done," declared Laura Ingraham. "She came prepared with facts, stayed cool under pressure, and exposed the hypocrisy we see daily from the left." Even more damaging for Booker was the reaction from his own side. Progressive outlets that would normally defend a Democratic senator were notably restrained, with one prominent liberal website running an analysis piece titled "When Righteous Indignation Meets Proper Preparation: Lessons from the Bondi-Booker Exchange Behind the Scenes." The fallout was even more significant. Democratic Senate leadership held an emergency meeting to discuss the implications, while publicly supporting their colleague privately, worried about the damage to Booker's brand as an above-the-D's fray moral voice, and about what other financial connections might now face scrutiny. Republican strategists, meanwhile, immediately recognized Bondi's enhanced political capital. By the next morning, she had received calls from multiple conservative organizations and media outlets seeking appearances. 3 senators had reached out about potential committee testimony on other matters where her prosecutorial background could be valuable for Booker. The personal consequences were immediate. His carefully cultivated image as a political crusader, untainted by the usual Washington compromises, had taken a significant hit. While his base would remain supportive, the exchange had created a template for future opponents, a way to respond to his moral positioning by raising questions about his own record at a deeper level. The hearing represented something more significant than one political clash. It symbolized a turning point in how prepared conservative witnesses had become when facing hostile congressional questioning. For years, progressive politicians had dominated such exchanges, creating viral moments, fundraising opportunities. Bondi had demonstrated an effective counter-strategy, meeting emotional accusations with documented facts in a calm prosecutorial manner. 3 days after the hearing, the story continued to reverberate. The Wall Street Journal editorial board published a piece titled "The Bondi Standard," arguing that her performance should become the model for all congressional witnesses facing partisan questioning. Meanwhile, Democratic strategists circulated private memos advising members to be more cautious when attacking witnesses who came from legal backgrounds, particularly those with prosecutorial experience. For Pam Bondi herself, the aftermath brought both opportunity and responsibility. Appearing on Fox and Friends, she downplayed the persona L aspect of the exchange. "This wasn't about Senator Booker or me," she explained. "It was about ensuring that important policy discussions don't get derailed by personal attacks. We need to be able to examine election procedures without questioning each other's motives." The measured response only enhanced her standing, demonstrating that her hearing performance hadn't been about personal animus but professional standards. When asked if she had political ambitions, Bondi smiled and said, "I'm focused on contributing where I can be most effective right now. That means bringing factual analysis to important national conversations." Political analysts noted that Bondi had achieved something rare in modern politics, a defining moment that crossed over from partisan circles into broader public awareness. "Whether you agree with her politics or not," noted one veteran Washington observer, Pam Bondi, just wrote the playbook on how to turn a congressional hearing ambush back on the ambusher in the weeks that followed. The concrete impacts of the exchange became clear. Booker, once considered a potential presidential contender, saw subtle but meaningful changes. In his political position, invitations for high-profile speaking engagements decreased, media requests shifted from national policy issues to New Jersey-specific matters. Fellow senators who had once sought his partnership on legislation became slightly more hesitant, worried about the new scrutiny such associations might bring. More broadly, the Bondi-Booker exchange altered how congressional hearings were conducted. Witnesses came better prepared with potential counterpoints about their questioners. Members became more careful about launching personal attacks that might invite retaliation. Committee chairs instituted more rigorous rules about staying on topic. The confrontation had revealed something fundamental about modern political discourse, that in an era of performance politics, authentic preparation still mattered more than practiced outrage. Pam Bondi hadn't just won an exchange. She'd revealed the fragility of carefully constructed political personas when faced with unexpected facts. 1 year later, a political science professor would include the exchange in a textbook chapter titled "Pivotal Congressional Moments That Change Political Trajectories." The professor's analysis concluded, "In the social media age, politicians often prepare for virality rather than substance." The Bondi-Booker exchange demonstrated the limitations of that approach and the enduring power of the "ar-gride" factual preparation. This dramatic showdown between Pam Bondi and Cy Booker teaches us something vital about today's political landscape. The most powerful weapon isn't righteous anger or moral positioning, but thorough preparation and unshakable composure when under fire. When confronted with emotional accusations, Bondi responded with documented facts. When faced with interruptions, she maintained steady focus, and when attacked personally, she turned the spotlight back on her attacker with precision rather than fury. If you found this political analysis insightful, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more deep dives into the confrontations that are shaping America's political future. Comment below with your thoughts. Do you think Booker will recover from this exchange, or has Bondi permanently altered his political trajectory? And which political confrontation should we analyze next? Until our next video, remember that in politics, as in life, the prepared mind will always prevail over the passionate heart.